finale of the step-by-step DIY build, part 4. It's time to take this thing all the way to water testing and get it ready to be a functioning aquarium. So what are we going to do in this part? Well, we're going to drill holes for the filtration and the internal wetlands filter. We're going to sand down all the fiberglass and get everything ready for painting with our 2-part epoxy paint. We're going to put multiple coats of epoxy paint. We're going to silicone in the glass and the bead around the glass. We're going to put in the top bracing, and we're going to fill it full of water and make sure it doesn't leak. And at that point, we'll have a functioning aquarium. And of course, after that, we're going to do the launch of this aquarium, where we're going to aquascape it, put in the fish, the plants, and I'll finish the outside of the aquarium so it looks all nice and neat. But in this episode, we're going to have a functioning DIY aquarium, so let's go. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and drill holes up in the top of that baffle for our wetlands filter to flow back into the aquarium. So we're going to end up with 5 bulkheads going across the top of that, and that's where the water is going to return back into the aquarium. So we're going to make the mess of drilling the holes and sanding that down and sanding down all the fiberglass seams, especially like, for example, over here you can see there's a little bit of a mess, a little bit of cleanup to do. If I put my finger along here, I can feel a little bit of a raised part right there. We got to get that out of there. So we're gonna, and then also here you can just see a little bit of fibers left over stuck on there. So we're gonna get that all cleaned up with the sander. We're gonna get it all vacuumed out, and then it will be time to paint. But first, let's start by drilling some holes. Okay, to drill the holes up there for the bulkheads, we're gonna use a hole saw kit here, and what I've done is I've found the hole saw that is the tightest possible fit to the bulkhead that we're gonna do. We wanna have the just big enough to push it through, but we wanna leave plenty of room for the flange on the bulkhead. So let me go ahead and get this on the drill, and I'll go ahead and drill 5 of those. Okay, this is really important, so I wanna make sure to get this on camera. So when you're sanding, you'll see you'll get some, when you have some high spots, you'll get some like white areas. See that kind of whiteness there? And down here, the whiteness? That's what it looks like when you're getting rid of those high spots, like over here. But if you look closely right here, you can see where I'm actually sanded behind it. So that needs to be scraped off some and then resanded. Now this is on a flat surface, so I'm not worried about, I don't have to refiberglass it. But I do need to get that pocket out of there, so I don't create a bubble behind the epoxy paint. But everywhere else so far, where you see the white spots, it's just the raised epoxy being sanded off, and it's not actually a problem with the fiberglass. Okay, to get that imperfection out, I'm just going to use a heavy-duty metal paint scraper. If this were one of my larger aquariums and I had a big, large area like that, I'd probably use the Dremel. But just for a small area like this, heavy-duty scraper is going to work just fine. So you can see what we're doing is we're just going to work off the fiberglass that has the pocket behind it. So I can get the front of my scraper in there. All right, let me get 2 hands for this. Okay, you can see I've got the pocket chipped out. So behind there you had that air pocket, and that was this whole piece right here. So once that's removed, we're now flat and smooth again. And this flat piece doesn't really matter if it's fiberglass. This is just the fiberglass from the seam, like that. So, but it is important to get any bubbles out, because that can cause a weakness in your epoxy coat. Like down here, this one is actually solid. It's raised up, but it is actually solid. So you get just the whiteness, but you don't have a pocket like over here. These are the ones that are going to compromise your epoxy paint. The raised ones, where you just knock the top off, smooth them out, and you have the whiteness, these are fine. But you can tell, you put your fingers over them and you push down, there's no flex at all. It is solid. So that's what you're looking for. You'll feel it when there's a flex. Okay, the part I chiseled out, I went over and sanded and got it smooth, and I've gone over the entire aquarium, including on the inside of the filter box there, and sanded everything down and ran my fingers along everywhere. to make sure there are no high spots and no no places like this. So yeah, a little touch up on the front. I was inside there, so I'll clean up these edges here on the front now that I'm outside. But we got all the high spots knocked down, and anything raised up or with a pocket like there, we got that knocked out. Okay, so time to clean up the front a little bit around the edge, and then go ahead and get the vacuum out and get this all cleaned out with a vacuum, and then take a wet towel and wipe it all down and get it ready for epoxy paint. All right, I've triple checked all the fiberglass seams and in fact, all the areas that are fiberglass. Make sure there's no bubbles. It's all been sanded down, it's all been vacuumed out, and it's all been wiped down with a wet towel. Each one of these sections, I always want to say, well, this is the most important, but the reality of it is they're all important. It's a foundation, you got to build it up. So we built the tank right, it's rigid. We fiberglassed the tank, we did it correctly. It's no bubbles, it has good seams, it's sanded down. Well, now it's time for the payoff, which means easy application of the pond shield. All right, so I've triple checked all the seams. All the fiberglass seams are good. They've done the check where I've run my fingers all along them. In fact, everywhere I fiberglass, I've run my fingers on it to make sure there's no protrusions, no bubbles, nothing like that. It's all been sanded down, it's been vacuumed out, and it's been wiped down with a wet towel. We have a prepped surface for waterproofing, which in this case is a 2-part solids epoxy called Pond Shield or Pond Armor. And I always want to say with each one of these parts, this is the most important part, but the reality of it is they're all important. If you didn't build a rigid foundation, then you wouldn't have had good seams for doing clean fiberglassing. And if you didn't do a good job with the fiberglassing, you wouldn't have a good prep surface for the epoxy coat, the paint that's going to waterproof it. So the reality of it is you have to do it all right. But the payoff is when you did the structure correctly, the fiberglassing wasn't that difficult. When you did the fiberglassing correctly, you'll see the painting won't be that difficult. So it builds up on itself, and sometimes people ask, how long do these tanks last? Well, the very first one I built 25 years ago is still in service. I gave it to a friend, he's moved it 6 times. He doesn't even have it on a proper stand. It still supports water to this day, and it's never leaked, it's never had a problem. So, well, I can't say that. He might have messed up with bulkheads and stuff, but the tank has never leaked. And, so if you build it right, it can last forever. And I can tell you, the 3,000 gallon, whatever, it's in my house, I wouldn't build something with 3,000 gallons in it if I didn't expect it to last forever. So that's the same with this aquarium as well. This whole build series, this is a, built to last forever tank. This isn't, oh, this is good for this period of time. No, I expect it to go forever. All right, so let's get into all the materials we need to paint this sucker. Okay, just like with the fiberglassing, there's a couple important factors here. One is there are some tricks that make this go a lot better, and 2 is have all your materials out prepped, ready to go, so that when you're painting, you're on a timer. You can't just stop and then go set something up. Get it all ready, get it all laid out, be ready to go, so you can just go. All right, now for the tricks. So the tricks are, you see 2 sets of boxes of Pond Shield here. So what I do, there's going to be multiple coats, and each coat alternates colors. So the top coat, the final coat, is black over here. The undercoat is going to be gray. It's important to use a different color. So when you paint on gray or tan or blue or whatever, and then you put black over it, it's easy to see where you haven't covered. If you just get all black or all one color and you paint the first coat on, well, when you go to put the second coat on, it's very difficult to tell if you missed a spot. I mean, you're literally having to look to see if it's wet or not, and that's not the easiest thing. So use different colors. And how do you choose the underlayment color? Well, what I do is I choose the cheapest color. They don't all cost the same price. In fact, they can be considerably different in price. So whatever the cheapest color at the time is, that's what I buy for the first coat, And then obviously the top coat, I use black on mine, but you got to get whatever you got to get for that. The second thing is, I didn't get a giant 5-gallon thing or gallons of it. I got quart kits. So even when I was doing the 3,000 gallon, I got smaller kits, 3-gallon kits, not the bigger 5 gallons, because I want to work with batches that are manageable. Now in this aquarium, I'll be able to paint the whole thing with one batch, but by having 2 separate kits, so this is one session of painting, and this is one session of painting. These are 2 kits. I'm gonna mix these two into here, and then I'm gonna paint an area. And then I'm gonna mix these two into here, and I'm gonna paint the rest of it. And the same thing when I do the top coat. Versus if I just had a gallon set up and I, you know, either would have to measure it out instead of just pouring all the contents, the containers in there, easy peasy. Or if I made a huge batch, I'd have to make sure I work fast, and then you might have mistakes. So those are the tips that I found making a bunch of these tanks that help you out, that make it easier and get a better result. And two is the materials you're painting with. So you're gonna want a paintbrush for the corners. So all of the seams, I should say, anywhere there's a seam, you're gonna really put this on with the brush, and you're gonna get it down in there. And then you wanna have, for sure, a roller for the big flat areas. And I like these kits because they do have a small roller too, which comes in handy for, you know, areas around here. There's a lot of areas where it's not as easy to get into, so the little roller helps. And these, you know, I keep these little kits around. I keep a whole stack of them in my closet because I'm always doing projects, and they're worth their weight. All this came in here, plus an additional one of these, and 2 other brushes. And they used to be like $8, but they're a little more now with inflation. But they're relatively cheap, and then when I'm done, I can throw it all away. It's all disposable. Because once it gets covered with epoxy, it's done. The whole kit will be done. You don't want to use your good paintbrushes that you're going to wash out. And that doesn't happen with 2-part epoxy. Whatever you use to paint with it, once you're done, that stuff is done. It's gone. Okay. So now on to the tank. So obviously I've got 2 sides here. So because I'm doing the internal wetlands filter, so painting inside of here is going to be more difficult, obviously, than painting in here because it's a big open space. So what I'm going to do is I'll build a kit, or I'm going to mix a kit, and I'll work on this outside first. So then I'll show you how I'm painting it on, so you just get a feel. You know, I'm going to sit the camera back and I'll, you know, do the time-lapse thing on it, and, you know, hopefully it helps just seeing the application. I won't be able to, you know, I could narrate it after the fact, but once I'm painting. So, you know, I'll set up the tripod, and you know, we'll see what we get. But the key thing is that I'm using the brush on all of the seams, and then I'm using the rollers on all the flat areas. And one other thing I want to point out is that you can put it on thick, so it's self-leveling, and it's actually pretty hard to put it on so thick that it runs. So I wouldn't worry about that. You want to put it on thick. And the other thing is there is a mixing, like you can actually mix in isopropyl alcohol to thin it out to give you a longer painting time, but I choose not to do that. I have done that before, and it does work, but then it takes away that thickness of it to where when you're doing the verticals, you can have runs and everything. And while it does extend the time, I use the smaller batch method rather than a bigger batch and thinning it out. So this is my recommendation. You know, the other way might work for you, but this is what works for me. And I'm gonna stick with what works because I've built a bunch of these, and, you know, knock on wood, everything's been good so far. All right, so let me get the camera set up, and let's start painting. All right, there we go, the first coat. Everything is looking good, and I did realize a couple things I should mention. So I said that you could put it on really, really thick and you won't get runs, and that's mostly true, as I point out some runs. But towards the end I had some, you know, I was just getting rid of the leftover paint, and I put it on super thick, and you can see it does run, like over there. So take that with a grain of salt. You can put it on really thick, but there are limits, and you could have a run. So just something I want to point out. And the other thing I want to point out is you might be looking at it, you might be thinking, wow, you know, I mean, it looks like it would hold water right now. I don't see any wood or anything. I mean, you can see where we're not built up thick enough because you can see the fiberglass layers from underneath it. But, you know, for the most part, there's some areas where it's on thick. It looks like we're built up pretty good. And of course, you can see other areas where it's a little thin there. But you might be thinking, wow, this could hold water right now. And if you were somebody who was not taking your time and doing it properly, you might be tempted to just try to get by with one coat. And that's another reason I use a really ugly color for the first undercoat, because I'm like, I don't want my tank to look gray. I definitely got it with the black on. Now I'm gonna do the proper amount of layers, but you know, sometimes, you know, when you're younger, if you're in a hurry or you're excited for the fish, maybe it's a good idea to make that first layer really, really ugly so that you definitely put the proper amount of layers on it and don't be tempted to skimp it all. Now this was definitely fun, doing the inside of the filter box. It's a little bit of a tight space. I found a routine, you know, like a rhythm to it, where I started painting it in certain ways and it got a lot better. And as you can see, really good coverage in here. Now I used the same amount of paint in here as I used in the much larger area out there. So that tells you how paranoid I am painting inside of a enclosed space where I can't see or work as easily. So I want to make sure I just overkill it. So yeah. But all in all, it looks pretty good. Nothing obvious anyways, but it is not as easy to see down in there as over here. So like I said, I'm going to overkill it again with the next set, which is the next coat, which is the top coat in black. Oh man, that's some work right there. Second coat's on. Let's take a close look. Okay, the gray is covered. We are all black, and this should give us the amount of thickness we need, but it's wet right now, so I'll wait till it all cures and then I'll inspect it, and in case I need to do any more I will, but it looks good so far. And let's take a look up here in the filter box, and yep, that's all black. And you'll also notice I went ahead and I just did the epoxy coat on the top rim of the aquarium as well, because you know, when you have covers and everything, you get a lot of moisture up there, so I don't worry about the sides. But and I am going to paint the top as well. So yeah, you can see that I did epoxy coat on the top of the aquarium, but I will be painting over that in white colored paint. Leg will be on the outside of the aquarium. So the next step for us in the build here is to, well, first of all, let this epoxy cure, then we'll inspect it, and if it looks good, if it looks like a top finish coat, we'll go ahead and start working on getting the glass siliconed in and start cutting the bracing and getting the bracing all painted up. And then once that's all complete, it'll be the water test. And that will be the end of the build video, part 4, which is the tank will be built holding water. Then the premiere video will show the entire outside of the aquarium trimmed out, looking nice, and painted properly and everything. The light canopy, the covers, the stuff I'm doing with the plants. It'll have the fish, the whole 9 yards, the aquascape. So that'll definitely be pretty awesome, as well as the wetlands filter. You'll see the whole process for setting that up in that premiere video. But for now, I'm going to take a break and get some heavy glass down here and get it situated, because it's time to install glass. So that is the final coat of black pond shield in there. You can see it is heavily coated. Very, very thick and looking really good. It kind of absorbs all the light. Let's go up top. So again, the black paint absorbs the light quite well, but you see the filter box, we're all filled up there, and you can sort of see here, how the water's going to be coming over. And I don't want to give it away, but it'll sort of flow into the aquascape there. And you can also see that I went ahead and painted the top of the aquarium as well, because once the lids are on here, you get fairly decent amount of moisture contact up here. So I go ahead and use the pond shield up top, and I'll paint over it in white, because this tank's going to be white on the outside. But it does give that extra protection. But yeah, we're all painted up, so it's time for glass. So you see I have the glass over here on the side of the aquarium, going through its final inspection for my assistant down there. So what I have here is 1/2 inch thick tempered glass, basically 4 feet wide and 3 feet tall. All right, so when it comes to glass, it's a big topic. It's hard to even know where to start. But let me go through and touch on a few key points. So we'll talk about float or plate glass versus tempered glass. You know, why you don't see a lot of tempered glass in commercial built aquariums, and why I use tempered glass. We'll also talk about where the glass comes from and what it takes to get these big pieces of glass brought to the house. And also we'll talk about some, what I would say, not necessarily false beliefs with certain types of glass, but just maybe some things that are blown a little bit out of proportion. So let's just start with plate glass versus tempered glass. So plate glass, in a nutshell, it comes in large sheets and it gets cut to size. So of course a commercial manufacturer of aquariums, they're going to want to use plate glass because it's much more economical for them to get these very large sheets and cut up the glass for the various aquarium sizes. Versus tempered glass is, you know, quote unquote baked. Each piece is made to one size and it cannot be cut. So for a commercial aquarium builder, that is not an economical way to build aquariums. You do see a little bit of tempered glass in smaller commercial tanks where they use it on the bottom part where it has the most pressure, and that is mostly to save weight on bigger tanks. They'll still do plate glass, float glass on the sides, and this is like a 265, a 220, a 180, these kind of tanks. They get quite heavy, and for regular people to be able to move these things, they gotta try to lighten up a little bit on that. And since the bottom panel on all those tanks is the same, well, not the 265, but the 220, the 180 and all that, they can have a whole bunch made in mass, I guess. It helps with the cost of that. So why do I use tempered glass over plate glass? Well, tempered glass, the benefit to it, you know, we know it costs more, we know it's harder to make, but the benefit is it's much, much stronger than plate glass. It's not a little bit stronger, it's 3 to maybe 5 times stronger, 3 or 4 times stronger, something in there. So it's significantly stronger. And so because it's stronger, you don't have to go as thick with the glass. So 1/2 inches of tempered glass is a little bit stronger than 3/4 inch plate glass. So what that does save you is weight. It saves you a lot of weight. Just this one sheet of glass, it's heavy. You know, this is just a 4-foot section of glass, a 4x3. A lot of my tanks, the glass panels are 8x3, and they're quite heavy. They're not easy to move around. So it's a big deal to shave off weight. I mean, if you have a piece of glass but it weighs 600 pounds, you know, what are you going to do with it? You know, you can't move it around. So basically, the tempered glass is stronger, and it requires thinner glass for the same amount of strength or more strength than plate glass. So it's lighter. Now, other than the fact that plate float glass comes in big sheets, it can be cut up, and it's more commercially economic or viable for a commercial aquarium builder. What's the downside to tempered? A lot of people, so tempered is extremely strong on the side, the tall side, the front, the back, that kind of thing, and it has a very, very good safety factor for pressure or a straight-on hit to the glass, or basically pressure pushing on the glass. So where is it weak? Well, it's weak on the edges. So tempered glass, if you hit it on the edge, it will shatter. Sometimes they call it safety glass because instead of being giant shards of glass, it will shatter into little pieces. So incredibly strong, you know, on its face, and incredibly weak on its edge. So also with commercial aquariums, because of the design of them, a lot of pressure is put on the corners of each tank on the edge, on the bottom edge of that. So that's another reason you don't see tempered glass used in side panels a lot on commercial aquariums, because if there's any flex to the underlying stand, you know, that's going to torque the aquarium, where one side is torqued this way and then the other side is torqued that way, that's gonna shatter that stuff all day long. Now it's gonna break plate glass too. You'll see plate glass crack like crazy when you have that. It's not like plate glass is immune to that, and you can have a crooked stand if you're using plate versus tempered, but there is a real fear that the tempered glass could shatter if it was put on like that. So why is that not a concern for me and how I'm building my aquariums? Well, let me jump inside the aquarium and illustrate for you how the glass will be installed in my aquarium and why tempered is a beautiful fit for it. Okay, we're inside the aquarium, and this is the front panel here where the glass is going to go. So this is what's called face frame. The entire face of the glass is going to be pushing against the frame all the way around. A significant amount of framing touching the glass, so it is incredibly well braced in terms of its face. Now also, this aquarium is incredibly rigid front to back, so you're not going to have any flexing. So what ends up happening is the glass ends up basically being pushed up on a very, very large gasket, a silicone, and the glass is essentially what they call floating. So it is adhered, the silicone adheres to the pond shield, it adheres to the glass, and the glass is pushed up initially by me to get it to adhere to the silicone, but over time the water pressure pushes the glass extremely tight against the silicone, causing a giant silicone gasket to be formed around the whole aquarium. And as well as on the bottom, there will be silicone on the bottom that the glass panel is sitting on. So in a scenario like where I explained with a commercial aquarium that has a plastic frame around the bottom, the glass is siliconed to another piece of glass, on a corner, we don't have that here. We have a piece of tempered glass that is essentially floating. So we're getting all the benefit of the strength of the tempered glass with the pressure pushing on the face of the glass, and we're getting none of the weakness of the glass because the edge of the glass is not actually compressed in any way. It is literally floating. Now when I say floating, is the glass going to move around? No, it's not going to move. But if it ever did have to move, flex at all, up and down, side to side, it wouldn't have a, and again, we're talking very, very small amounts of movement that would occur, but it wouldn't impact it at all. It wouldn't crack the glass, it wouldn't shatter it, anything like that. So tempered glass is ideal for this kind of build, and it saves you a lot of weight, and it gives you a lot of extra strength, and much higher safety factor than float glass or plate glass would give you in the same scenario. Okay, so all that said, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the glass from over there and I'm going to stage it inside the aquarium and all the way in the back of the aquarium. And then I'm going to start siliconing the inside part of the front part of the frame. So I'll be siliconing, basically if we're on the, if this was the other side here, this entire thing will be siliconed on the inside here. This entire front face is going to get siliconed, and then I will move the glass forward up against that gasket, and then I will clamp it up at the top, push it down at the bottom, and then put in some braces. Then I'll put in some bracing front to back down to the bottom to adhere the glass against the silicone while it cures. That curing time ideally is 7 days. Can you cut it short a little bit of that? You can. It depends on how thick the gasket is and the conditions of the air or the environment in which it's curing. So silicone needs lots of moisture in the air to cure quickly. Basically, if you have a high humid environment, like for example, a whole basement full of aquariums, while I do control the humidity, it is still, usually around 45%, so it's not dry, arid climate. Like if you're in the middle of a dry desert or something like that, I think the silicone would take up to 2 weeks to cure. Versus here, that 7 days might be cut down to 5 days because I have optimal temperatures. It's 79 degrees and it's 45% humidity in the basement most of the time. Sometimes the humidity is a little lower, doesn't really go much higher than that because I have dehumidifiers and conditioners for the air. But the temperature always stays the same. So I find that when my build's inside here, it usually fully cures in around 5 days. And then we can add water. And it can cure underwater, but it does slow it down quite a bit. So I don't know that that's worth doing, in my opinion. Wait the time, let it cure properly. All right, so let me go ahead and get the glass stage in there, get the silicone tubes all prepped and ready, and then we'll get the glass put into place and braced. So I was just staging the glass in the tank behind me, and I realized I forgot to talk about one part, which is where I get the glass from. Well, over the years, I've got it from many places. I've got it from local glass shops, I've ordered it online, and they've delivered it to my house, and I've ordered it online, and they've delivered to a freight location where I had to go pick it up. In my experience, the best situations I've had is when I've been able to get it from a local glass shop. The price has always been comparable or better if you factor in that there's usually no shipping, that they will bring the glass to your house, and they bring it on a big panel truck, panel van kind of thing. So they can handle very large pieces of glass with that truck and get it right to your house. Versus in my experience with freight, if you get a piece of glass that is over 6.5 feet long, basically it comes in a larger pallet, and they won't put it on the home delivery truck because it doesn't work with their pallet jack and the back lift of the truck. So you have to go to the freight center and pick it up, which means they're going to bring it out with a forklift, which means your vehicle has to be able to accommodate a forklift putting the crate on your vehicle. And if you have long glass, like 8, 9, 10-foot sections of glass, they can't necessarily come in from the back on the crate. It's not set up that way. It's meant to be put on from the side. So if you have just a pickup truck, you're going to put it in the back, they kind of stick a little bit on there and then sort of push it in there. It's not that easy, so you kind of need to have a trailer or something like that. It is possible to get a pickup truck. I've done it with 8-foot sheets, but it is definitely a chore, and if you get a grumpy forklift driver, they may not want to do it. So those are some other things to factor. And lastly, the shipping is, it used to be high, now it's really high. So for example, the piece of glass behind me, 40% of the cost of the glass was shipping. So, you know, that's pretty crazy. So the fact that local glass shops are usually only a little bit more once you factor in that massive shipping cost, they're a no-brainer. Unfortunately, by me, a lot of the glass shops I used before, they're not around anymore. And some of the larger, so I used to go to some of the smaller glass shops because they'll just do anything, like any project you want, custom, whatever. They're all over it. They're very flexible, very customer-oriented. A lot of them closed down, unfortunately, and now some of these larger, more generic glass shops, if you're not asking for a shower panel, a shelf, or a top for a table or something like that, they don't want to, not interested. Custom half-inch thick acrylic sheets, tempered glass sheets, they're just like, not for us. So I've been having to order the glass online and having to pay all that extra shipping. So it's evolved over the years, and I'm sure it will still evolve, but that's my experience ordering glass over the years and how it is currently. All right, let me get this glass situated and get the silicone prepped, because when it comes time to put the silicone in, you need to have all the silicone tubes cut, ready to go, because like most of the things, you're on a clock, you want to go, get it in there, get it pushed up there before any of that silicone starts to cure. So once I get the glass inside the aquarium, and before I start doing any silicone, I make sure that it fits in place. And it's a good thing because this one was close. This is really close. I measured the glass against the wood framing, kind of forgetting how thick the pond shield really gets on both sides. Now this does fit, but it is close. So what I do, let me show you. So I just get the glass in the aquarium and I go ahead and get it put into place, and just to make sure, from side to side, it is a perfect fit. And like I was mentioning, there is no room for error here. We are right on the edge on each side. So you notice I have some blankets in there. So what I'll do, now that I've tested that the glass does fit, I'm going to go ahead and put the silicone on the inside. And so I'll move the glass back, I'll silicone the inside of the frame, then I'll bring the glass forward and start clamping it and bracing it and getting it adhered to the silicone. So, all right, I do have to confess, I am still using the manual silicone gun. Anyone who's been watching this channel for a while knows that people have been saying, why don't you get a electric silicone gun instead of, killing your hand squeezing off tube after tube after tube for these builds. And I'm not against it. I'm not a glutton for punishment. It's not like I have some anything against electric silicone guns. I'm not trying to torture myself. I just always forget when I go to the store to pick it up. I'm always like, oh, I'll wait and just get it when I'm going for something else, and I always just forget to do that. So all right, fortunately this is a small build compared to the 3000 Predator Bay, where my hand felt like it was going to fall off after squeezing out all those tubes of silicone. So this won't be that bad. I estimate that this should be 4 tubes or less, so it shouldn't be too bad. And speaking of that silicone, So as you can tell, I keep a few boxes of these around, but what we're using is GE Silicone 1 clear. The clear part doesn't matter. What matters is right there, 100% silicone. That's the most important part. The one thing that's, so we do want 100% silicone and no other product. Doesn't matter which one, as long as the only ingredient is 100% silicone. It can be tricky because sometimes they do put additives in here, and one of the reasons they say is to inhibit mold, or stop mold from growing on the silicone. The reality of it is silicone by itself with no additives is actually mold inhibiting. It's not easy for mold to grow on it, so it kind of comes with the territory of the actual product. So sometimes you'll see a tube of silicone that says mold inhibiting or mold inhibitors, and it still says ingredients 100% silicone. That's just marketing. They're just trying to make it seem more valuable than it is. As long as it's 100% silicone, you're good to go for use for aquariums. Doesn't have to be aquarium silicone or anything like that. Just your standard GE1. This is like the granddaddy of silicone. It's been around forever. I've used it on all my builds. It works perfectly. It's cheaper. Just go with this. All right, so I'm gonna hop in the tank, move the glass back out of the way, and then start siliconing the face of the aquarium here. Once I start going, I have to keep going with that. It's gonna be hard to film, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and silicone the whole thing, get the glass in place, get it braced up, and then I'll be able to show you from the inside. You'll be able to see the big, thick gasket, and then I can do the separate bead, which is the sealant bead around the side. That'll be easy to do afterwards, and then show that. So we're gonna have the gasket, the massive amount of silicone gasket. We're gonna get the glass brace, and then we're gonna put the sealing bead all the way around the side. That's where we do the nice thing with the finger and make it look clean and get that sealant, give that nice seal on the outside of the glass. Well, if the clamps and the silicone up there isn't giving it away, the glass is installed. So this is the outside, but more importantly, I gotta take you on the inside and show you the gasket and show you the sealing bead. Okay, so the first step was we put the silicone all on the frame, all four sides, the bottom, the sides, and the top. So that's our gasket, that's our face framing. The glass is pushed up against the frame. Now that, all this big thick bead up here, and here, this isn't actually what waterproofs it. This is the gasket that the glass pushes against with the water pressure. It basically just holds it. And this is where I'm telling you, it can move a little bit. Yes, it is glued to it tightly, but it is not fixed in place. It can slightly move, which is a benefit for this kind of build. Now, the part that makes it waterproof is this big honking bead down the side. So that's separate. So originally, I put the gasket, I put the glass up, I clamped it, I braced it from the bottom, basically put a blanket on the back of the tank and 2x4s pushing forward to get the glass to adhere to the silicone. And then I come back the next day and put in that big giant sealing bead all the way around. Now in this case, we don't have to worry about the top. Enough squeezed out, and I made sure there were no gaps just in case any splash or anything like that. But the reality of it is the water level is down here. You gotta remember there's gonna be trim on there. So if you look across there, the water's gonna be coming out where those holes are, which puts it, right about here somewhere. If I weren't gonna do trim on the outside, when I finish the outside of the tank, you might have a gap. So always factor that in when you're designing, where's your water level gonna be. So in this case, once the trim's on, it'll be fine. You'll only see water. So now that the glass is in place, it is the unfortunately frustrating part of you gotta wait for it all to cure. Again, it depends on the conditions. Like I said, if you have a real dry climate, I'd go, if it was super dry, you might go 2 weeks, but normally they say 7 days. And in my case, being in the fish room here with controlled humidity and temperature, I'm gonna give this 5 days, and then I will start the test fills. All right, now that I'm looking at these things, I should have put them the other way so I don't whack my head on them, but I'm gonna give this this inside bead, like I said, 5 days, and then it'll be time to test fill the tank. So the only thing left is to work on the bracing on the top. Now, this tank is a little unusual because it has that large baffle, which is actually connecting the front and the back of the tank, but I'm gonna still put top bracing on, just like I would any other tank, and that's basically, we wanna take the front of the tank and the back of the tank, and we don't want it to flex out at all. We want it to stay perfectly rigid in place, both for the pond armor and for the silicone seal. So it doesn't take a whole lot on a tank like this. Usually the go-to is a 2x4 and a couple lag bolts. You could also use big screws. So for this one with the internal brace, I might do a 2x4 and I might do 2x2 because I'm going to have, I don't want to give away the plans for the aquascape, but I have some specialized bracing I'm doing that isn't necessarily for maintaining the structure of the tank, but it's for what I'm going to do with the aquascape. So something to give me some structure to tie things to, that kind of thing. So we'll see. I'll end up, like I said, bracing front to back. That's the key thing here because all of our corners are all braced. So and there might be a little bit of extra side bracing, just like I said, to give me something to tie structure to. All right, so for me, it's hurry up and wait, and for you guys, it's on to the water fill. All right, you guessed it. We're filling up the DIY build, the moment of truth. I think we're starting here on the filter side. That was the hardest part to work on, and we'll let it overflow into the other side and, you know, take a look and see how the flow is. So let me show you. All right, well, sorry about the noise, but the water is noisy. We are fill testing the DIY build. As you can see, the glass is all, silicone's all cured. It's all ready to go. We have a waterproof box, and we're gonna start by filling up the filter side of the box, because like I said, it was a little bit harder working over here than over on the large side. So we're gonna fill this up, and then we'll watch it overflow through those holes into the other side. And then I'll just catch up from time to time as it fills up, and I'll inspect it for the dreaded L word, but hopefully everything goes as planned. All right, that is a huge filter box because that took a while to fill up, but here's the moment of truth. We're getting ready to overflow through the outlets into the tank, and so far so good underneath. No water on the floor yet, you know, knock on pond shield. And there she goes, heading over the top. So let's see what the amount of water flow we have going in, how high it's able to get on the threshold there. My expectation is not very high, like pretty much what we're seeing right now. Okay, looks good. I think it's done what it's gonna do with the amount of flow there. Let's go look in the front. All right, it's go time. We are filling up the big box. Exciting stuff, but also always a little bit of anxiety when you're putting water in these for the first time, but everything went well. Inspected everything multiple times, so we should be good. Certainly not my first rodeo building these, so I have a high level of confidence. What little things we ran into were easily solved, so no concerns about that. But it's good to see, because trying to gauge with how much water is coming in from this hose versus what I had in mind for the pump and everything, and it's looking pretty good because I kind of want the water flow to ultimately be about halfway up and cascade into the water, and then it'll all make sense when I do the reveal video of the tank, aquascape, and everything. But the way the water is coming into the aquarium and the way the aquascape is going to go up there, it's going to make sense when it's all done. Okay, so it is going to take a long time to fill up this 4x4 area over here. So again, I'm going to go ahead and click off for now. We'll give it some time and then we'll check back. Okay, that is the operating height of the water. We're all filled up, and now it's just time to wait. So far so good though. And as far as here on the front, you can see the water line is just perfect, because once we have the trim piece on, it'll be nice and hidden and give me a little bit of room for evaporation. And I know you're thinking, all right, I see the water's in the aquarium, but what about underneath? Is there any leaking out? Nope, so far so good. We're all dry underneath. All right, it's full of water. So far so good, no initial leaks. That's awesome. But now we gotta let it wait a little while. We gotta let a couple days go by. We gotta make sure it truly is not leaking anywhere. So it just takes a little bit of time to find out for sure. So we're gonna let it sit, and we'll keep an eye on it. When I come back, if everything looks good, then we will go over the total cost of the build, what it took to get here, and we'll do the top bracing. And this build will be done. You will know what it takes to go from start to finish, building your own 315-gallon DIY aquarium. And then after that, there'll be the next video after this build series, because this is part 4, this is it. Build series is over. What comes next is the live premiere release of the tank. So what should you expect for that? We're going to actually make the outside look nice and pretty. We'll trim out the whole thing, top, bottom, painted, the whole 9 yards. All those guys who go nuts when I don't finish the outside of the tanks, where I take a long time to do it, no worries here. It will be done. And then we'll be doing the wetlands filter. We're going to be building that from scratch, and I'll show you that whole process. I'm super excited for that. I can't wait to have that in action. And of course, we'll do the top we'll get the top bracing set up for the aquascape, because basically the aquascape and some of the top area, the waterfall and the top bracing in the back, they're kind of integrated. You'll see it all makes sense in the live premiere, how I tie all that together. And then of course we got to get the lighting, we'll get the filter going, all that good stuff. And then we're going to aquascape the tank, and we're also going to stock it with fish for the live premiere. So it's going to be a little bit before that comes out, because you cannot rush these biological processes, and you do not want to introduce fish into an environment that is not ready for them, because that's not how we do it here. We build ecosystems in Aquarium Maine fish basement, and we keep fish for their entire life, and we try to extend those lives as far as possible. We do move from time to time fish from tank to tank, but they always go up. They only get bigger. They only get promoted. Nobody gets demoted here in the aquarium basement. Okay, I'll be back as soon as this has had a chance to test out over a couple days. All right, exciting times. The waterproof was successful, and in fact, it actually went a lot longer than I intended. Real life getting in the way. So as you can see, not only is it held the water, some of it's even evaporated because it's been that long. So it's the longest water test I've ever done. As you can see, looking good around there, and no leaks underneath. And for those who are worried about the trim work, you can see I've actually even sort of started on that. So yeah, we have a functioning, or at least we have a waterproof 315-gallon aquarium. All right, so it's always better to get it right the first time, and we did here with no leaks at all. So once again, take your time on the framing, take your time on the fiberglassing, take your time on the waterproofing, and you get a water test that works out perfectly. No leaks. That's the goal. You know, anyone who knows construction knows these are overbuilt, so there's a reason, because it really sucks having water on your floor. But we have a completed 315-gallon aquarium. And before I get into the cost, there's one thing I just want to touch on here, just in case I missed it in the earlier episodes, is that because I'm not doing a sump underneath and I'm just framing in the sides, the plywood on the sides is screwed in and it's structural. So it's giving the tank support front to back. If you weren't doing that, if you were building it with a sump underneath and you wanted to have good access, you'd need to put a 2x4 from the front post to the back post of the build on each side. So you'd have rigidity from front to back from any sort of swaying. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I can't remember if I covered it earlier on. Because the thing is, you know, you heard me say a lot of times at the beginning of this build, custom, custom, custom. So a lot of things, like exactly how you would do it, depends on what you're trying to do with your tank. So where do we go here? All right, well, let's get to the total cost of everything. So up on the screen now, you're seeing the total cost from parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are the major construction parts of the build. Part 5 is just the cosmetic work that you can see I've started on with the aquarium, but obviously, depending on how you're building this, if you're building this aquarium in wall, that's not going to apply to you. If you don't like the way I'm trimming it out, then what I've done trim-wise is not going to apply to you, so I put that as optional. So we can see that the cost to actual build the aquarium is just under $1,500, and the cost with the way I'm going to finish the aquarium is just a little over $1,800. And whether that extra $300 is worth it to you, well, you have to wait and see when I do the live premiere of the aquarium, because then it'll look a lot different. It'll actually look really beautiful on the outside. It'll be totally trimmed out and painted and looking good, and it'll also have all of the lighting and the filtration and everything else going on. So it's going to be a completely functioning tank. So again, this is the completion of the build. You can see everything that went into it, including the tools and materials I used, the time it took to do it, and the cost for all the different materials that I chose in this build. So where we go from here is the live premiere, and this is going to be super exciting. So whether you're interested in building aquariums or not, the live premiere for this tank is going to be awesome. We're going to be doing the wetlands filter. First time for me doing it in an aquarium. I've done it in a pond environment, but not an aquarium. So I'm super excited for that. We're going to be building a very cool not a canopy, but a bracing system for suspended lights. And we're going to be doing top bracing that's going to integrate some areas for plants. So that kind of gives you an idea. We're going to have some emergent growth plants coming out of the top of this aquarium. And there's going to be a really, really cool aquascape, something that's going to require above and beyond, not just piling up rocks, but there's going to be structure, and it's going to be built up, including a waterfall coming in. It's going to be something else. If it's even half as good as it is in my head, it's going to look pretty cool. So once again, thanks for following along with the build. I hope this helps you if you're interested in building a DIY plywood and a wood and epoxy aquarium, fiberglass aquarium. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you at the live premiere for the DIY 315 build. Thanks for watching.